I was carrying a tray of champagne when I heard it. My sister's voice, low but sharp. If she asks, just tell her the business failed. The hallway was dim, the air thick with laughter from the party behind me. But those words sliced through everything. 6 months ago, I drained my savings to keep her dream alive. I worked double shifts, skipped vacations, even ignored my own bills. And now, this. I froze, hidden in the shadows, heart pounding, mind racing. If she thought I'd just walk away quietly, she didn't know me at all. My phone buzzed that morning with a notification from TikTok. I opened it to see my sister's face filling the screen, a halo of morning light behind her, eyes glassy as if holding back tears. "My little sister is an angel," the caption read, her voice trembling just enough to make strangers feel it was real. She spoke about how I had saved her business when no one else believed in her. The comment section overflowed with heart emojis and praise for our unbreakable bond. What no one saw, what only I noticed, was the faint second line of text she'd slid under the main caption in smaller, faded font. "She has no idea what's coming." I told myself it was a joke. That's what I always did. My entire life had been about giving family the benefit of the doubt. Growing up, family is everything wasn't just a phrase. It was doctrine. When my father lost his job, we all tightened our belts without complaint. When my sister crashed my car in college, I lied to our parents and took the blame. Love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant silence. So when she called me crying 6 months ago, saying her business was on the verge of collapse, my instinct was immediate. I didn't ask for contracts. I didn't request receipts. I wired the money that night, more than half of everything I had saved. "We don't need paperwork," she'd said. "We're blood." And I had smiled because I believed that was enough. A week after the TikTok video, she came over with a bag of groceries and insisted we cook together like when we were kids. We chopped onions and argued over whether garlic should be added before or after the tomatoes. She told me funny stories about her clients, and I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the pan. It felt good, normal, the kind of normal that makes you forget to question anything. I didn't notice the framed photo on the shelf behind her, one I'd never seen before. Her standing with a group of sharply dressed people, shaking hands under a banner that read, "Partnership Launch." If I'd looked closer, I might have seen the logo. If I'd recognized the man beside her. If I'd asked. But I didn't. Bills started arriving at my apartment, her address on the envelope, my name on the account. She told me not to open them. "It's part of a surprise I'm planning," she said with a wink. I laughed, tucking them into a drawer. After all, we were working toward the same dream, weren't we? But little things began to shift. Mutual friends stopped inviting me to gatherings. One messaged me once, then quickly unsent it. When I asked my sister about it, she brushed it off. "They're just busy." Late one Friday night, she came home from what she called a networking dinner. Her dress was expensive, black silk with a slit up the side, but it was wrinkled and bore a dark stain near the hem. Her hair smelled faintly of smoke, not from cigarettes, but from something burnt and chemical. "You won't believe the deals I'm working on," she said, throwing her purse on the couch. I wanted to ask about the stain, but she was already halfway through a story about an investor from Los Angeles. The next morning, I found that same dress crumpled on the floor by the laundry hamper. The stain was bigger than I remembered, deep in the fabric, the kind you couldn't get from spilling wine. I told myself it didn't matter, that business dinners could be messy, that my sister, the one who called me her angel, couldn't be the same person who'd hide something from me. But as I stood there, fingers brushing that ruined silk, a thought crept in and lodged itself like a splinter. I didn't know where she'd really been last night. I didn't know who she'd been with. And I didn't know how much of the story I thought we were living was a lie. If I had looked at that photo on the shelf a little closer that night in my kitchen, maybe I'd have recognized the danger. Maybe I'd have stopped her before it was too late. But I didn't. And soon I'd learn that the stain on her dress didn't come from any dinner table. It came from the kind of meeting where people shake hands, smile for the camera, and sign deals they never want you to see. The house was warm with the smell of candles and cake. Laughter drifted from the dining room where my mother's friends had gathered for her birthday. I carried a tray of champagne flutes down the hallway, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. That's when I heard it, my sister's voice, low and clipped. If she asks, just tell her the business failed. I stopped, the glasses rattling on the tray. My pulse slammed in my ears. The hallway light flickered, catching on the edge of a gilt-framed painting. "She'll never see the paperwork," another voice replied. Familiar, softer. My mother. The tray tilted in my hands. A glass tipped over and fell. The crash echoed down the hall, sharp as a gunshot. I stared at the spreading puddle on the carpet, my vision blurring. "Be careful," my mother called lightly, as if nothing had happened. But when I turned, she was standing at the end of the hall, her expression blank, her eyes fixed on me with a stillness that made my skin crawl. She didn't come closer. She didn't ask if I'd heard them. She just turned and walked away, her hand brushing my sister's arm like sealing a pact. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just my sister's lie. The next day, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open but untouched. My phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown Instagram account. No profile picture, just a single line of text, check account ending 3849. I stared at it for a long minute, my fingers frozen above the keys. Finally, I logged into my online banking, heart thudding. The account belonged to my sister's company, at least it was supposed to. But the transaction history told a different story. Large sums had been transferred out over the past 3 months, not to suppliers or payroll, but to entities I didn't recognize. I began to dig. One company led to another, a chain of LLCs that circled back in a dizzying loop. Then I saw it. One of the shell companies was registered under my father's name. I sat back, staring at the screen. My father, who'd taught me how to ride a bike, who'd slipped me $20 bills before school trips, who'd hugged me so tight the day I left for college that I thought my ribs might crack. He'd always been quiet about money, but I never thought it meant this. The coffee shop near my apartment was nearly empty that afternoon. I sat in the corner booth, fingers wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. The hum of the espresso machine and the quiet clink of cups were a comfort, like white noise against the roar in my head. I thought about the summers when Dad would take me to the pier, just the two of us, eating greasy paper cones of fries while gulls screamed overhead. I thought about the nights when storms rattled the windows, and he'd check every room, making sure I was safe. And now here I was, staring at proof that he was part of the same lie my sister and mother were weaving. The waitress passed by, topping off my coffee. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. Yeah, just thinking. But the truth was, I wasn't just thinking, I was unraveling. On the screen of my phone, the list of transactions sat like a row of silent accusations. Each date and dollar amount was a fracture in the foundation I'd built my life on. I knew I couldn't unsee what I'd found. I couldn't go back to the comfort of believing my family's loyalty was unshakable. And yet, as I stared out the window at the pale winter light, a part of me still wanted to pretend, to believe that there was some explanation, some missing piece that would make this make sense. But the splinter of doubt was already lodged too deep, and soon I would pull it out and see the infection for what it really was. I wasn't looking for answers that morning. I was looking for distraction. I opened my email, intending to drown myself in work, when I noticed a shared Google Drive folder in my sidebar. My sister's name was on it. She must have forgotten to revoke my access. The folder was messy, full of invoices, scanned contracts, and random images. I almost closed it, thinking it would be more of the same, but one subfolder caught my eye. Financial Overview, Private. Inside were spreadsheets detailing transactions, each neatly labeled. I copied them to my own drive before opening one. The numbers didn't add up. Payments went to businesses with vague names, Northwest Consulting, Bright Horizons LLC, but the amounts were too large, too frequent. I uploaded the files into a financial analytics tool I sometimes used for work. Within minutes, the AI flagged 27 suspicious transactions. My eyes scanned the list until they stopped on one entry that made my stomach drop. A $15,000 transfer to an account I knew by heart. It belonged to Daniel, my ex-boyfriend. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd left me without explanation, disappearing overnight with nothing but a curt text. I'd thought that wound had healed, but seeing his name there ripped it open again. The question roared in my head. What connection could he possibly have to my sister's business? I sat back, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. All the loyalty, all the sacrifices, all the trust, it was starting to look like every person I'd once let close to me had been sitting at the same table, playing the same game. That night, I went to the small coffee shop, where my sister often held her off-the-record meetings. The barista behind the counter, a young guy with dark curls and a quick smile, glanced up when he saw me. "You're her sister," he said, not as a question. I nodded cautiously. "I've seen you around," he continued, lowering his voice. "You should know, she's here a lot, with people who don't look like investors. One of them gave me this, said to pass it along if you ever came in." From under the counter, he handed me a folded slip of paper. On it was a phone number and the name Aunt Lydia. Lydia had been the family's black sheep for as long as I could remember. The official story was that she'd moved away and cut contact, but now I wondered who had really severed the ties. I called her that evening. Her voice was raspy but warm. "I was wondering when you'd find me," she said before I could introduce myself. She invited me over to her small apartment across town. Old photos lined the walls, family gatherings where I was a child in pigtails, standing beside her. She poured tea and told me things I'd never heard, how my father had been deep in debt years before I was born, how he'd borrowed from dangerous people, and how the family had rallied to protect him by any means necessary. And now, she said, history was repeating itself. My sister was borrowing again, not from banks, but from a local loan shark with a reputation, for getting his money back at any cost. The room seemed to tilt. I pressed my hands to my temples. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because, Lydia said gently, you were always the good one, the one they could count on to believe whatever they told you. Her words stung because they were true. That night, back in my apartment, I sat in the dark. My mind spun with everything I'd learned. Was I going too far, digging this deep into my own family? Could I still stop this without destroying what little was left between us? Could I forgive them if there was some twisted reason behind it all? I didn't have answers, only questions that felt heavier with each passing hour. Then, just after midnight, a dull thud at my front door broke the silence. I opened it to find a plain black envelope on the mat. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and on it a message typed in bold letters. You're not ready for the truth. The wedding was the perfect cover. My cousin thought I was there to celebrate, but I was there to stage a different kind of ceremony, the burial of every lie my family had told. The ballroom shimmered with gold lights, the air thick with the scent of roses and champagne. I slipped my laptop to the AV technician an hour before dinner. Play this during the toast, I said. He didn't ask questions. When my cousin raised her glass, the projector screen lit up. At first, it was family photos, birthdays, vacations, smiling faces. Then the images changed, scans of bank statements, transfers to shell companies, a $15 payment to Daniel's account. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I spoke over the murmurs. These aren't rumors, these are transactions. My sister, my parents, they've been moving money behind my back for months. This is the truth they never wanted you to see. The room was electric, a mix of shock, anger, and something darker, vindication. Then, as if on cue, a voice from the back cut through the noise. I'm a victim too. Heads turned. It was my uncle, face flushed, holding up a crumpled folder. They did the same thing to me last year. The air shifted. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a family pattern, a legacy of betrayal. I didn't have time to process it. Before I could respond, a firm hand gripped my elbow, pulling me toward the exit. I barely caught a glimpse of who it was before we slipped out of the ballroom into the quiet of the service hallway. My sister's voice exploded online before the night was over. She had gone live on TikTok, spinning a story about how I was mentally unstable and making up conspiracies to ruin her business. Her followers flooded the comments with sympathy for her, but it didn't last. Within hours, a popular account had stitched her video with clips from the slideshow, overlaying them with a voice saying, "Receipts don't lie." The internet did what the internet does best. It dug deeper. Screenshots of her social media posts from the past year surfaced, showing luxury trips she claimed she never took. The hashtag with her name trended, paired with the word fraud. Meanwhile, our family group chat imploded. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all chose sides. Half defended me, citing the evidence. The other half accused me of tearing the family apart. And through it all, silence from my mother. The silence broke with a text from my father. If you keep going, you'll regret it. Just that. No greeting, no signature. My hands shook as I read it, but not from anger, from fear. The kind of fear that starts in your stomach and crawls up your spine. I made an appointment with a therapist the next day. Sitting in that softly lit office, I felt the weight of it all for the first time. I thought I was doing the right thing, I told her. but I'm scared of what they'll do next. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't tell me to let it go. She just said, fear means you understand the stakes, but it doesn't mean you stop. For a moment, I felt lighter, until I stepped into the waiting room to leave and saw him. The person I feared most was sitting there, waiting, his eyes fixed on mine. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and cold air. My sister sat at the defendant's table, her hair pulled back in a tight knot, eyes fixed on the judge. My lawyer slid a small USB drive across the polished wood. "Your Honor," she began, "we have a voice recording that directly pertains to the financial discrepancies in question." The judge nodded. The clerk pressed play. My sister's voice filled the room. "Move the money to the second account. No, she'll never find it. Just tell her the business failed." The sound of her laughter afterward was sharp, almost metallic. Gasps rippled through the spectators. My sister's attorney objected, claiming the recording was taken without consent. But my lawyer was ready. The laws on recording in this state are clear. One-party consent. The plaintiff was a party to the conversation. Before the judge could respond, my lawyer added, "And there's more." During discovery, we uncovered additional documentation implicating another party. She placed a manila folder on the bench. The defendant's mother. The room went still. Photos of bank transfers bearing my mother's signature were displayed on the screen. Dates lined up perfectly with the missing funds. My mother sat in the front row, her face pale, hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. I was about to breathe when the courtroom doors swung open. A man in a dark suit walked in, his presence pulling every eye toward him. I hadn't seen him in years, but I knew him instantly. Daniel. The judge called for a recess. I stayed seated, my nails digging into the wood of my chair. What was he doing here? When the trial resumed, the truth began to spread wider than I'd imagined. Under cross-examination, my father admitted to withdrawing family funds to pay off old gambling debts. He tried to soften it by saying he'd plan to pay it back when he could, but the damage was already done. Then my uncle took the stand. His voice trembled as he revealed that these manipulations weren't new. "It's been this way since our parents were alive," he said. "Money moving in circles, lies told to keep certain people afloat. We were told to protect the family name at any cost." Listening to him, I felt both fury and grief. Fury for the decades of deceit. Grief for the possibility that maybe my family had never been the safe place I thought it was. When the proceedings ended for the day, I didn't go home. Instead, I walked to the small chapel 2 streets over. The scent of wax and incense hung in the air. I lit a candle for my grandmother, the only person who had ever protected me without asking for something in return. I sat there in the dim glow, letting the quiet settle into my bones. For the first time in months, I let myself just feel. No strategies, no evidence, no revenge. Just the weight of everything and the memory of her gentle hands. When I returned to my apartment that night, an envelope was waiting under my door. Not black this time, but cream, heavy stock. My name was written in ink I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 4 words typed in bold. The other one remains. Beneath it, a signature I'd never seen before. The remaining one. Freedom didn't come with a parade or confetti. It came with silence, the kind that follows months of chaos. and a stack of legal documents finalizing the court's judgment. My sister owed me restitution. My mother's involvement was on public record. My father's gambling debts had been exposed. The truth was out, but the scars remained. I decided that if my family name had been built on deception, then I would rebuild my own on truth. It started with a modest office above a bakery in the quieter part of town. The lease was cheap, the walls smelled faintly of cinnamon, and the place had just enough space for a desk, a microphone, and my laptop. I named the company Glassline because nothing inside it would be hidden. Every week, I recorded an episode of my podcast, stories of financial betrayal, survival, and the slow art of reclaiming your life. My voice, once hesitant, grew steadier. Emails started coming in from strangers across the country, women who'd been swindled by brothers, men whose parents had drained their inheritance, friends betrayed by business partners. I realized my story was far from unique, and that made it all the more urgent to tell. Invitations followed. First, small community centers, then larger venues. I spoke to audiences about red flags, about boundaries, about the quiet manipulations that erode trust. Each time I took the stage, the knot in my chest loosened just a little more. Then one afternoon, after an episode aired, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "You should see this." Attached was a set of scanned documents, bank records, property transfers, signed affidavits. The sender wrote only, "Your uncle wasn't the first. This is still happening." As I scrolled through the files, my stomach sank. The names on the documents belonged to relatives I barely knew, distant cousins from another state. The scheme mirrored the one I'd uncovered in my own case. Fake business ventures, shell companies, money funneled quietly out of family accounts. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. For weeks, I'd told myself that my fight was over, that I'd cut the rot out of my life. But here it was again, spreading like ivy through another branch of the same tree. That night, I walked by the river, the city lights reflecting off the black water. I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Does this ever end? If every time I cut one thread, another appeared, what was the point? Was I willing to keep pulling until there was nothing left of the fabric? I didn't find an answer. Just the sound of water against stone, steady and indifferent. Still, the next morning, I was back in the office, planning my next episode. I couldn't control the whole web, but I could keep shining light into its corners. The work grew beyond me. I started a foundation with the restitution money, the Boundary Fund, dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse by family members. We offered legal consultations, financial literacy workshops, and a network where survivors could connect without fear of judgment. Through it all, I built my chosen family. There was Mia, the barista who'd first passed me that slip of paper. Aunt Lydia, with her blunt wisdom. Aaron, my lawyer, who stayed long after the case was closed to help guide the foundation. They weren't bound to me by blood, but by choice, and that made their loyalty worth more. 1 year after the trial, I stood backstage at the city's largest conference center, waiting to deliver the keynote address for a national summit on financial empowerment. My hands no longer shook before I spoke, but my heart still pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing that every word mattered. When my name was announced, I stepped into the light. The applause rolled over me, warm and steady. I spoke about trust, about betrayal, about the danger of silence. I spoke about the day I'd heard my sister's voice in the hallway and how that moment had splintered my world. Halfway through, I told them this: family can be the place you find your greatest strength, or the place you learn your hardest lessons. Sometimes it's both. And the family you choose can save you in ways the one you're born into never will. The audience rose to their feet when I finished. I should have felt complete, but my eyes drifted beyond the bright lights, scanning the back of the room. That's when I saw it. A figure stood apart from the crowd, motionless. The lights didn't reach their face, but I knew the shape of it, the posture. My breath caught. The applause faded into a dull roar in my ears. I couldn't move, and then, as if sensing my gaze, the figure stepped forward into the light. It was family,